Welcome to this conversation that I decided to call The Sovereign and the Minister. As I think everybody here knows, that's the designation for the two kinds of fire in the body and in the world, you could say. Um, and tonight I just decided in honor of the fire horse year, it would be a great time to talk about fire, and we're going to talk about it from the perspective of the primary channels, which in my estimation is a very deep and vast uh topic, actually. Um of those primary channels that people like to think are less than some of the more esoteric or um, you could say complicated channel systems, but they're also so broad and so influential in almost every aspect of life that I find they continue to unfold their depth over time, for me anyway. And I want to start the conversation with a very short poem that, as far as I'm concerned, probably encapsulates everything I might try to say. But we'll see. Um, and this is uh, from Terry Tempest Williams. Some people might know she's a nature writer and wonderful person. And this is from a book called Finding Beauty in a Broken World. What is a body but a house? What is a soul but a light? What is heaven and earth but the same shared radiance? In Chinese medical thinking, the human being is exactly that, right? Heaven and earth together. And when we think about fire, we think about sort of two main aspects, right? Heat and light. Tonight, well, I don't know all of what we'll talk about, but we're going to start with what I think is the very interesting part, which is the aspect of light. We don't often take that into account. Heat is very obvious, right? Heat in the body is obvious. Heat is obvious in its function, right? Which is, at least on the primary channels, metabolic. So the yang organ systems, the small intestine and the sanjiao, have, you could say, almost a straightforward job in this regard to manage heat. But light is a little less obvious and a little more interesting to think about. And so I want to profile the heart and the heart protector, the pericardium, and the different ways that they relate with light and substance, which I think is profoundly different and profoundly altering to understand. So the heart, the sovereign, right? The heart is the sovereign. Basically, the heart radiates outward, right? It has the capacity to bring blood to your limbs, to your farthest reaches. And we think of it as sometimes it's talked about as a space or a void, right? Where the Shen, where the spirit rests. And spirit by its nature is pure yang, it's pure light, and it simply radiates outward without any real effort on the part of the person, you could say. You don't have to try to be a radiant being because you already are. And so you can't help it. We talk about it that way. We talk about seeing um, shen in somebody's eyes, right? We talk about seeing their spirit or in their skin, right? In the way their skin radiates or reflects light. So this is the domain of the heart. And in that regard, the heart itself has no agenda, no story, no need for either of those things. It arrives on the scene just like sunlight with no problem. So, this is very interesting to contemplate when somebody brings their story to you. Because some people will give you story, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But some people will not be able to do that. And if they're unable to do that, that is a good indication that the heart is involved in whatever dysregulation or pathology you might find, right? Just from a spirit standpoint. And particularly, they might have trouble connecting outwardly, right? They might have trouble finding the energy at the surface where they can connect. So they might also have trouble seeing the light of others for that reason, right? So again, you'll hear that in the way people talk about their experience, that either they might feel that people around them are not sympathetic or caring or compassionate for them. They might feel uh, yeah, that they can't find what they need in that regard. The other aspect of the heart that I feel like is so important to remember is the heart, it's out of time. It doesn't, it doesn't, um, it's just present. It's presence that is embodied in that aspect of our energetics. So when somebody is resting in their heart with ease, they are not calculating the time. They're not measuring the time. They're not thinking about the time. They don't, that's not forward in their thinking. So I think that we much more often see heart protector in action, right? So heart protector in the reverse of the heart, it actually mobilizes substance inwardly, right, to the torso. Pericardium, heart protector, brings circulation to the torso, to the three jiao. That's his job. And mostly it mobilizes blood, and through yin wei mai, right? Through yin wei mai, it mobilizes images via the blood. So what this means for when you're actually talking to somebody is that it this person will have a lot to tell you. They will have a really good story or a lot of story and a whole string of images and a whole string of meaning that they have given to those images. This is an important function, right? Very, very much, you could say human to tell story. But if they don't know the difference between presence and story, then they get stuck in time, right? They become stuck in time, which, again, if one becomes stuck in time, obviously the wood element is also affected, right? The liver is affected. But even more importantly, what happens is that stagnates the blood. And what that will do is stagnate the blood deeper and deeper in the body because of it being heart protector, right? Deeper and deeper. Specifically in women, you'll see that disruption in their menstruation, right? In their pelvis. So that will mean that especially if somebody is still menstruating, that it's much easier to address that as an issue. When they're not, you have a whole host of other issues. But um, so just to again, contrast these two, which I think is important. The heart protector is all about mobilizing substance in service of meaning and story in life. And you could say illuminating inner life, where heart is all about illuminating outer life. It's interesting because the sovereign, in cultural terms, is often well protected, right? You don't just walk into the Capitol and see the president or walk into the, palace and see the queen. It doesn't happen like that. But at the same time, their presence is felt as they radiate outward. The way that the society is structured, the way that things are done in the government, etc., you feel their presence. This is the nature of sovereign fire, right? You feel their presence. And it's key that it's their presence, not their story. In fact, their personal story, not important, right? Which is why, especially if you watch, if you watch The Crown, they did such a wonderful job in that series portraying her commitment, Queen Elizabeth, to not letting her personal life get in the way of her duty as sovereign. She was very clear that that job does not involve my story. She had her story. She loved horses and she had her sister and she had her story. But she did not let that into her job as the sovereign. So some of us will be present to our, in the clinic as somebody who is completely obsessed with their story. Some of us know about that personally. We can become obsessed with certain stories in our lives, or the opposite, completely having no story at all, maybe even being lost to their inner life, but having some external commitment, some project that they can consider their domain and that takes over their life, their job, right? Or their artwork or their children, right? So it's not, I don't want to suggest that we shouldn't have a heart protector, but to understand that its job is to create a kind of articulation of substance, meaning you can see pericardium, heart protector, talk about need, right? Where heart will be desire, will be devotion, will be desire. Where the pericardium will be more about need, and sometimes those needs are covertly advertised as desire, or the reverse. And that's where you'll know that is a heart protector in action there, right? The other image that came to me as I was contemplating this is that the heart protector will, we say, bank the blood, meaning um, keep reserves on hand, right? Will help to keep reserves on hand. And even if you just imagine what it's like if you have a wood stove or you build fires and you know, have played with the mechanics of fire, you know that the fire gets hotter when you bank it, right? The fire gets hotter when you constrain it. So this is an interesting feature that you might experience or see that, um, and it's complicated on a functional level, right? We call it damp heat. Damp heat. So just to consider that it might mean that that heart protector has been banking quite a lot for whatever reason. Oftentimes, the reason is that the person feels um, bereft or lost or depleted in some way, that they have trouble giving themselves space to need or want things. So instead, they bank the blood. And again, that can look like damp heat. It can also look like blood stagnation, various forms. And which is why so much in practice we see so much need to use the heart protector, right, to help move blood in the torso, in the pelvis especially, both men and women. So for me, especially in thinking about working with fire in this coming year, where there's both a fire year and a young animal, especially an animal that is highly sensitive, which is another aspect of fire. It's very sensitive. It moves easily. It responds to almost anything, right? This is good. It's very important, and it can become problematic. It can become exacerbate things that are small can become big fire very quickly in certain circumstances. And to understand what actually helps fire to burn easily and cleanly, right? And cleanly, and that would be the lungs. That would be the breath, right? That would be the breath that allows that. It does not affect the pericardium in the same way because the pericardium, the heart protector, is connected to the diaphragm in a very different way. So this is also interesting just to notice on a physical level when people become anxious and it involves their heart, which usually means they don't know what's going to happen, right? They feel afraid. So now heart and kidneys are involved, right? Because they feel afraid. And so this will cause them to breathe higher and shallower, which will actually activate fire. It actually whips it up, which is fine if you need to mobilize chi. But if you already have too much anxiety, it's going to make it worse, right? So that the strategy for that, right, is to breathe into the diaphragm, right? The strategy for that is to breathe into the belly, which it's well known, but just tying these things together helps you see when you look at somebody where they're breathing, how they're breathing, and that's telling you so much information. The reason I think that's important is that if in fact the heart protector is dominant, like I said, you'll get a lot of story, and it will be hard for you, perhaps, to discern what of that is actually relevant. So, by observing some of these other ways that you can identify the difference between these two, you can actually have a better grasp on where things might be originating. And yeah, and I've said this before, and it always probably gets me in trouble, but I'll say it anyway. You should never believe anybody's story, including your own, right? So, that's this is tricky for us because we care and we listen and it's easy to get involved in the story. But just to remember, stories stories require context, right? Now, my context for a lot of what I'm saying to you is that mindfulness is the most important skill in the clinic. And that what that means is all of the knowledge, and I'm not trying to diss our education in any way, but actually, your most important um, asset in the clinic is how present you are, because then you can receive openly what is in front of you, right? You need to know your own story, right? So that you can drop that one at the door and let what is true in that moment be alive for you, right? Because you can't use anything else in that moment where you meet somebody in the actual um, meeting, hands-on meeting, right? You're not going to turn away and say, "Let me look you up in the book," right? Because they're not in the book, and you're in the room. So a good bit of what I say is premised on the idea that your presence is your best asset and that you will see and feel the things that are needed in that moment, right? To trust that, which is your heart, of course, being open and being available. And I think we have to mention love. We have to mention love in our discussion here. And for me, love is a way of being present, right? It's just another form of presence. It's on the it's on the same level as um, what we call the higher emotions in Buddhist practice: compassion, joy, equanimity, and loving kindness. And love is kind of the combination of all four. And it's in my um, way of talking about it, it's a form of union. And the heart, as the seat of that love, is willing to be in union with whatever is happening, has no hesitation and no blockage to that. So we always hope we sit in our heart, in our sovereignty when we work with people because of that, right? We look for that as our way. Um, and much of um, my work is to help people find that sovereignty in themselves so that they can be present, right? And and then your light ignites the fire in others around you without you having to do anything, right? Heart protector is how we care for ourselves. Heart is how we care for others, right? So at the point where we recognize our um, inextricable relatedness with all of life and beings, at that point, one begins to see that it's only in our hearts that it matters, right? It only matters that we can rest there. When you take the pulse, when you listen, you don't have to be anywhere else but in your heart for it to be perfect, for it to be successful. But um, when someone does tell you their story, they are talking about their inner life and their reality, right? Which is meaningful, especially in context of their why they arrived in your space, right? So we're not dissing meaning, but we are talking about method a little bit, right? We're talking about the method. And it's not very sexy, the method. There's not much to do in a certain way. People ask me all the time, what do you do? What do you do? Do you do acupuncture? They say, do you do acupuncture? I say, of course I do acupuncture. It's just that um, it's more important how you are than what you do, right? Almost in every case, that how you are will be what they remember. How you are will impact everything about what you do. So, um, that isn't to say it isn't wonderful to use needles. They're wonderful. They do amazing things, especially when you know what's actually happening, right? Especially when you can see and sense where somebody resides. The reason that fire is such an interesting topic to me is that, and we've all had this experience, both probably in the clinic and in life, that fire is a beautiful thing. People with lots of fire are very magnetic as well as radiating, right? So I would suggest that the magnetism comes from the heart protector and that the illumination comes from the heart itself. So again, just recognizing the way that fire itself is present can be very useful in cultivating a context where somebody might be willing to allow fire to change them, right? So oftentimes in the body, the fire, the heat we see is has been trapped, right? It's been cornered, trapped, or some in some way thwarted in its effort to complete a task, whether it be a metabolic task or a way level task of getting rid of some pathogen, or uh, a deep spiritual task of purifying one's karma. Whether it doesn't matter what it is, if it becomes constrained, it becomes problematic, right? So we're talking about creating the conditions where it can operate freely and um, it can shine and be seen in its beauty and effervescence without becoming uh, consuming, right? Because the thing about fire in the body when it is not in right relationship. So by right, I don't mean right versus wrong. I mean right as in upright, Zheng Qi, right? As in having a relationship that is based on exchange, free and open and willing exchange, right? So when that relationship is not happening, when it's not in right relationship, then the danger is that it becomes toxic. This is how we get fire toxins. It's how we get damage to tissue. So fire that goes inward via the heart protector becomes toxic if it begins, right? It begins to incinerate and cremate tissue. So the key is understanding how to move that energy when you see it. And what you're going to need to understand is where it is and where it needs to go, right? So this is another very interesting aspect to me. So the heart controls the orifices. So if something is stuck in the torso, in what you could say the domain of the heart protector, you will probably be finding it on the 8 extraordinary, and it will need to get onto the primary channels in order to get out. The 8 extraordinary are structural, they do not have outlets. You can't get something from the 8 extraordinary vessels out of the body unless it gets onto the primary channels via the source points or the low points, right? And from there, it could get to the sinews and be released, or it can get to the lower orifices through the digestive system and the urinary system and be released. But most often, if it comes that way into the primary channels, it's going to manifest in the orifices in perception, which is another feature of the heart, is its capacity to alter perception. So this is different from the way you could say the windows of the sky and the lungs alter perception because that alters perception instantly. When the heart alters perception, it's so much more about um, letting go of the story, right? Letting go of the story. And for many people, that is huge healing, huge healing. To be freed from the story, to understand the context, and be liberated from it. So, they did a lot of work to make meaning from what happened to them, but there comes a point in that process where they have to let go of the previous story in order to be liberated into this moment, right? They have to be willing. The structural systems require that there's a willingness that anchors that movement. And for somebody to be willing, this is why we think of faith. So faith is associated with the kidneys because it is not based on experience. It's based on gut, on feeling in the belly, really. And that's the kind of willingness that's required. Trust, on the other hand, is based on the willingness to open the heart, to start fresh, to begin again, to just breathe in and rest in the moment. This is trust. It's different. They're not the same. And what people think is trust is telling the story again and trying to make it true. But in fact, this is not trust. This is again what I would call blood stagnation, right? This is many of us, and I don't, I'm not trying to say any of us are better than our patients in this way, our clients, but this is when we say we've done the same thing over and over again in relationships over and over again. Why do I keep getting this same relationship and having this same experience? Because I'm telling the same story. Somewhere in me, I'm telling the same story. Till I liberate that, you could say it could go the way of incineration. I could make some heat for that purpose, or it could go the way of liberation by opening the doors and windows and letting it go. And there are lots of ways to do that, but like for us, we can do that very simply by using the points that do that, right? Um, yeah. And then there's essential oils, which I wasn't going to talk too much about tonight, but of course, the essential oils automatically change perception. So they all affect the heart in this way, right? They automatically change perception right from the start. And So they can be very useful in this way. Well, especially the top notes and of course the bass notes over time um, are very useful in that way. I think that's all I have on my page. So now the floor is open. And comments and questions are welcome. Or you can put them in the chat if you would like.
Hi, Josephine. Can I ask a question? That was so
Sure.
great. Thank you. That was
Yeah.
really, really enriching and really beautiful. And yeah, and I would love you to just elaborate a little bit more, if you would, about the relationship between the pericardium and the pelvis. That was
Ah.
like quite fascinating.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I know you did speak about menstrual health and but yeah, if you could riff about that a bit, that would be amazing.
Yeah. So technically speaking, it is on the primary channels, the heart protector that brings blood to the chest and upper middle and lower jaw. And because it's Juayin, pericardium and liver, which liver, is going to control the genitals and the reproductive system. So the two together are going to impact your sexual health, your reproductive health, your organ health, particularly through the blood, though, right? So these are the systems that mobilize blood. And so especially I mean, this link between the pericardium and the liver really impacts how people feel in their bodies. And again, connected to yin wei mai. So I don't know how familiar some of you are with yin wei mai, but yin wei mai is how we see ourselves through time. If you want to give it a one-liner, it's how we see our bodies and experience ourselves through time. And when we mobilize blood deep in the body on that Jue Yin layer, it has access to Yin Wei Mai. And when it gets into Yin Wei Mai, it now becomes much more static. It's no longer in blood circulation. So this, I think, is a really big thing to remember in women's reproductive health anyway, that you want the refresh. You want that blood from the Chong Mai and the Yin Wei Mai to get refreshed and to be released into circulation rather than to constantly be stagnating and storing, becoming heavier and denser. And you see the results of the condensation often at the end of their their at menopause, right? When they're stopping menstruating, and the blood becomes thick and brown and difficult. Um, and they become see menopause um, people are losing the thread. The story is going away because their resources have diminished. And this is part of the mental emotional complex around that change because the thing that they've been relying on has is going away. All of the blood and all of the story that they had their whole life that they remember is dissipating. And now they don't know who they are anymore. They don't know how to respond. They don't have the resources. It's a great moment to help people move into heart, move into sovereignty, right? And be great if they moved in sooner. But you get them when you get them. They come when they come. Yeah. Thank you for asking about that. It's a great topic.
Josephine, can you continue with that same topic a little bit in
Yeah.
terms of what that may mean in present time. So if it's not about menopause, but more in terms
Mm,
of being in constant flow and
yeah.
even how that flow may be impacted this year.
What was the
The,
last part?
and also how it may be impacted this year in particular.
Oh, whew, yeah. So the ante is upped this year, right? So what it means is if somebody, so your story will be challenged. And part of that story has to do with, especially for women, although for men too, being in constant motion, right? Our culture is so much about being in constant motion. And believe it or not, that is not the way to help that fire be healthy. So, the first impulse is like get on the horse and ride and go for broke, right? How much can you do? How much can you get done? How much can you raise the energy, right? Because it's exciting. The truth is that this year, with all the excitement and the heavy duty energetics in the cosmos, we need to sit still in that sovereignty, in that beautiful bath of firelight, right? All those planets beaming down on us, we just need to sit and receive it much of the time. And physically speaking, what that means is that the people who are trying hard to keep doing too much are going to get there. You will see more and more of derangement of fire in that way, right? So what that looks like in terms of bleeding is more bleeding, erratic bleeding, excessive bleeding, and it could look like bleeding upper or lower, right? Depending. And so it could mean also fire toxins in the blood. So that can look like skin rashes. It can look like urinary tract infection. It can look like it could go even as far as heart attacks and pericarditis and things like that, right? So it depends on the person where they're going to mobilize which jowl they're going to get stuck in, so to speak. But you see, the faster you burn off the fluids, the more heat there is, the quicker you get stagnation. So this is going to be a year where it's really important for people to hydrate. I say this all the time. I'm a broken record. Some of you know that. I cannot say it enough because the fact of the matter is, it won't help you to drink a bunch of water once every few days. Yeah. You're gonna have to drink it more often. Fire moves fast. Yeah, I have my water. Fire moves fast. I mean, you know that if you have kids and you've seen the way fevers operate, it's really the same, only we are gonna see more and more of it on the deeper layers of people's bodies because the influence of this particular year is so uh, it's what I'm told is that it's very unusual. And again, fire horse comes every 60 years. So there's that. And then there's the amplification of the cultural situation, which is that there is not a lot of room um, for people to slow down. There's not a lot of support for it. And so it will be a trick to get more and more space into people's concept of what they can do, right? So that they do not become consumed by the intensification of things. I don't know, I might have gone off topic, but it's gonna be an intense year in this way.
Hi, Josephine. This is
Hi.
Isabel. Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, again, my my camera's off because my monitor broke, as you know.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's still at Apple Care, so getting fixed.
Yeah.
Mike, I'm really loving your share. Thank you so much
Hmm.
for this. I'm curious about essential oils. You had mentioned that they could be one of our saving grace during this time. I'm wondering if you could mention a few that we could
Yeah.
apply. Yeah, just
Well, there are so many, it's hard to mention in with out of context. I don't know if you have a specific situation or condition that you would want to offer.
I was just thinking what you were talking about in terms of it's going to be very difficult to slow down.
Yeah, slowing down. Okay. Yep. Well, for
Part.
the main one for that would be spikenard.
Ah, wow, really? Okay.
Yeah. And spikenard is very powerful to ground people and slow them down. Clears a lot of fire. Um, but it's I personally don't like the way it smells. I
Mhm.
have next to me right now, somebody here is going to get, a couple people are going to get a good laugh out of this. This is cacao absolute,
Okay.
which I, I have been an aficionado of cacao long before it became very fashionable. When I was in acupuncture school, they asked us to write our own monograph for the Materia Medica,
Wow.
and I, of course, wrote about cacao. And cacao is a heart herb, heart and liver. And let's see, clary sage, that's another nice one for heart. And neroli, heart and spleen. Clary sage is more yin wei mai, so more jui yin. Um, yeah, those are just a few to think about. Um,
Okay. Just curious if there's one that you would recommend for, in particular, clearing our own story.
uh-huh.
Mentioned, is there one that come to mind?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I like that question. I'm gonna say it's gonna sound different from these others, but myrtle, green myrtle, which is a low vessel oil. So when you work with the lows, it helps to release story. So the low system is all about the stories that we've accumulated that are still with us, still present, that we have not stuffed them so far down that they're in the eight extraordinary. They're still in our awareness. So myrtle would be lovely for that.
Mm. Thank you.
Mhm.
Hi, Josephine. So,
Hi.
hi. When you talk about things manifesting in the orifices as perception, are you talking about literal kind of like, auditory variants, or, is it just the senses and the way people perceive the world in terms of the interaction with their story? Is it a physical or a subtle thing?
Both.
Okay.
So a change in perception could be a physical change, like a way that you're like, for example, I had a spinal cord injury and mostly it injured my eyes. So at that end, it got disrupted. So it physically changed my perception. I lost my peripheral vision and my pupils weren't dilating. So, that was a very physical reaction. Um, but it also changed my mental state, right? It affected me a lot. Um, and interestingly, that accident also brought forward things from the eight extras for me, also not surprisingly. Um, so, um, yeah, I think the essential oils provoke. people's way level reactions. So like on the skin and in the orifices. So you might, it could be as subtle as blinking and as grave as suddenly seeing something different in your world. And you might, you know, come home one day after somebody could come home one day after a treatment and say, never saw that about my situation before, right? Could be like that.
Okay, so it's not always necessary to kind of think of what we do as kind of purging people of things, but shifting their energy to a different perception or something.
Oh, I think that's lovely. Yes. Yes, that's great because basically um there is a big difference for me in the way that I understand working with people, which is that I would like their bodies to do it willingly, and I would like them to do it willingly. I would like not to have to be using my energy or my needles to make something happen that isn't ready to happen. So if you open the orifices, if you change someone's perception, then their body comes along with ease. And then they get rid of whatever they need to get rid of, right? Just naturally. And you don't have to work hard at that. And that is ideal. Yeah, ideal. Thank you.
I actually have another question. I liked what you said about the the heart kind of being this element of supreme consciousness, I guess, you know, the non-judgmental side of things and so forth. And then you mentioned like, you know, the heart expressing desire and devotion. And like for me, those are such different things that opposite spectrum. Um,
Yeah.
but because like I guess, well, just in terms of what I've understood today, like the pericardium self-care and then heart care for others, you know, if we unify those, obviously, then that's where we want to be. But uh, I don't know how do you, I mean, desire is one thing, but devotion is quite different. And so how do you deal with people? I mean, well, do you talk about someone being emotionally bound? How do you do this in a language, a sort of friendly way with your patients, I guess?
Oh, there's so much there. So can I ask you a question?
Oh, okay, then sure.
So how did you put this desire and devotion are I think you said they're so different or they're so far away. Can you say a little bit more about
Well,
that?
I guess I would say desire is like a very human thing, whereas devotion is a divine thing. Like, but that's just
Oh.
my way of seeing it, I guess.
No,
Yeah.
I think I understand that. Yeah. So for me, desire, yes, very human, and without it, we could never have devotion. So our desire is in that way divine, right?
Sure. No, but yeah, you can say
Right?
every devotion.
So
Sure.
you could say that desire, especially desire for something outside yourself, ultimately leads to the experience of devotion. And in the way I was trained anyway, in that longing, that longing is in a sense what brings you into the moment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So we want to uh again create the context for someone where it's okay for them to be in the moment with whatever is arising in their experience.
Mm, mm,
That
mm.
when they come to be with us, there is no prohibition on what the experience is. And in this way, they become devoted to their own experience, which is what we want,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
So just see someone's experience as stepping stones towards that, I guess, greater sense of selflessness, or is
Ye-
that
Both a greater sense of selflessness and a greater sense of embodiment, right?
okay?
So the healthy aspect of heart protector, right? The healthy heart protector says, I am fully here embodied. I'm not only present in space, but I'm present in this body. And when the blood becomes stagnant, we become confused. Am I present in this part of my body or am I present in that part? Am I present in this thing that's stuck or am I present in this thing that's moving? I don't know. So that's the confusion that comes from that stagnation. Whereas we can give them the experience of freedom of movement, right? Freedom of flow. And then they have that experience now that that's open to them. Now it's available. That's like the beauty of it, right? You've just made available to them what they need. You can't give it to them, but you can make it available.
Space. Right.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. And in fact, the way I was taught also, we needle into space for this reason. We don't needle into something. We're not trying to do something. We're trying to find the space so that the person can come to it. Yeah, great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah, thank you. Wonderful. Well, it's okay if that's all we're gonna say. We don't have to carry on unless we want to.
That was a nice way to end.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's lovely. Well, thank you very much for your attention, and it's lovely to see you all. It's always interesting. Lots of people sign up who aren't here, so they'll get the recording. Thank you. All right. Very welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I know what I was going to do. I was going to put in the chat, hang on. If you want to, if you're not already on my list, or if you want to, Danielle and I are going to do a little podcast together on Hexagram 30, which is fire over fire, radiance over radiance, the clinging. And so if you want to be in the loop for that, I'm going to put, here we go. I'm going to put two things in the chat. One is the link to sign up on my mailing list if you're not already on there. And the second is the Substack where the podcast will be. And where I am on Mondays. All right, there we go. You are so welcome. All right, there you go. All right, glad I remembered to do that. Okay, have a good rest of your day for those of you in the South. Happy Valentine's Day, and rest of you have a good rest of your day here in North America. Okay, bye.